Switch the mics on, don't I? But take two. Welcome back to H Hour. The microphones are on this time when I hit record. Perfect. The episode before this in your playlist is Icebreaker with Steve. Questions were submitted for Steve by H Hour patrons who got advance notice of the guest list, and they saw Steve on there and went, right, we're going to hit him with some questions. So skip back in your playlist if you haven't listened to that episode yet. It's about 20 minutes long, and then roll into this one, or do it in reverse. It doesn't matter. If you want to see the future guest list for H Hour and submit questions for guests like Steve was subjected to, some of them were quite difficult, then become a patron of the podcast. It costs about £3.50 a month, as little as £3.50 a month. Supports me, supports the podcast, and allows you to bombard the guests with difficult questions if you so desire. The blurb to do that is the link to do that is in the blurb of this episode. Enough of that. On to H Hour. Steve Holland, welcome to the studio.
Hello, mate.
Hello, mate.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure, mate. Pleasure. Really glad we get this arranged now. We met about 2 years ago now on the Lad Bible thing.
Yes.
Or was it early last year?
Early last year.
Yeah, dude, that was good. It was
good laugh,
giggle,
wasn't
that was, yeah, good guys and girls on that actually. But what I am excited about, genuinely excited about, is to talk to you because you have recent and extensive experience in two hotspots at the minute around the world. One is Ukraine and two is Gaza.
Yeah.
And as you will know probably more than anyone, sometimes the representation in the news of what is going on in these places is not as high quality as it should be for various reasons.
Yeah.
But also, I think we, as in people who haven't actually been there during these times, we can be very guilty of easily forming opinions and having perception of things that are going on there that are not necessarily true or accurate or a true reflection of what's going down and what people are experiencing.
Yeah.
You've been to both, and also your ex British soldier.
Yeah.
So you've got that experience to weigh up against. Can we talk about Gaza first? Is that all right with you?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. What the fuck is going on, mate? What the fuck is going on in Gaza? So you came back from there, a few weeks ago?
Yeah. So I very recently come back from Gaza. Did a recent trip in there.
To me, it just looks like on the news it's rubble. Just pure rubble.
It is.
Okay.
The only way I can describe Gaza is like a massive earthquake has happened, and absolutely more or less everything is flattened. Especially sort of Rafah, Khan Yunis. Darabella is the main hotspot for the humanitarian hub, what we call it. And a lot of humanitarians are in that zone.
So you're out there doing humanitarian
I'm
work,
out there
right?
doing humanitarian work, yeah. And I would say from the whole of Gaza, from the north to the south, Darabella, okay, is intact to a degree, but it does still get hit.
Why is that? Why have they left that? Why is that intact?
Because it's the main sort of launching point for humanitarians. And when I say humanitarians, you're looking at the UN, WFP, World Central Kitchen. Everyone that works within the humanitarian zone more or less congregates within Darabella, which is the middle ground. It's in the middle of the country. That's probably the reasons why.
You mean in the middle of Gaza?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, we refer it as the middle ground, but yeah, it's the central piece of north to south.
Yeah.
And I would suggest that that's one of the main reasons why Darabella is still very dangerous, but but some of the structures are still standing.
But pretty much everything else is decimated.
Yeah, I would say, from my experience, moving from Darabella, moving to the south into Khan Yunis and Rafah, everything, more or less everything, is flattened. There's nothing standing, give or take the odd building. Yeah.
And just to put, so I don't think most people don't understand like the size of Gaza and how small it is.
Yeah.
Like Gaza is smaller than London, like
Yeah.
significantly smaller than London.
Yeah.
It's tiny.
Yeah.
I think it's, what is it? Isn't it about 18 miles long?
More or less, yeah. It's
7 miles wide?
Yeah.
Something like that?
It's tiny. For you to get to top to bottom, from north to south, south to north, you could probably do that in a straight run in about an hour and 20 minutes. Top to bottom. It's really small, and it homes 2.1 million people. as it stands now, and yeah, there's very limited freedom of movement in Gaza.
I'm just looking at London. Yeah, London's 9 million, 2.1. Okay, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, so is that 2.1 million people that are there at the minute, and that doesn't include obviously the refugees that have left.
Yeah, so as it stands now, you've got approximately 2.1 million people. But if you bear in mind the amount of people that have been killed, bear in mind that people that have left, but it's around 2.1 million people. Yeah.
Where are most of the camps, the refugee camps outside of Gaza then?
So,
Jordan?
as you are aware, that there was a mass evacuation of Gaza City over the last couple of weeks. The IDF they did a huge offensive into Gaza City, and they do warn you prior to this happening. So what we've seen over the last 4 weeks was there's a new humanitarian zone that have been set up in Al Mawazi. So sort of the Khan Yunis, sort of Rafah bearing, and there is a humanitarian zone where everybody is being asked to move into. It's what we call the yellow zone. And when the IDF did an offensive into Gaza City over the last couple of weeks, due to them wanting to dismantle Hamas, you had hundreds of thousands of people evacuating south, with their whole life in the back of a trailer, and they do get warnings to leave, but they intend to leave at the last minute, and they have one road to move on, which is the Al Rashid road, which is what we call the coastal road, and it's literally a dirt track moving from south to north, and more or less everybody has moved to the south into what we call the yellow zone, which is the safe zone. And when you say there is not one grain of sand that you can see, everywhere you see there's a tent. Everywhere you see there's a tent that's been established for people to live. So yeah, you can imagine the chaos, which is sort of happening on this road. And the Al Rashid and the coastal road is more or less the only road you can move on to travel, because the Salahaddin road, which moves on the middle ground, there's only so much of that road you can use, and you sort of get diverted to the west onto the Al Rashid road because the IDF have got checkpoints there, and you more or less can't move because the road's been destroyed. So yeah, in regards to passage and freedom of movement, it's very difficult to move.
What is the dynamic like between I'd say between the aid agencies, the local population, Gazans, and Hamas?
The dynamics. So, there's a lot of agencies out there, that are doing a fantastic job. You've got the UN, WFP, World Central Kitchen. And then you've got Hamas sort of trying to disgruntle and cause problems within these operations where they're trying to divert aid.
You explain that?
Yeah. So a lot of the success in Gaza, okay, is first thing that you need to achieve is community acceptance. Okay, if you don't get accepted within that community, whether that's in Deir el-Balah, Rafah, Khan Yunis, Gaza City, you more or less got a problem straight away.
You mean as an aid agency?
As an aid agency.
Okay.
You have to build the trust from the community. And for you to be accepted and for you to be successful, in regards to feeding people, you have to have the acceptance from the local community. What we found, what Hamas try and do, is they try and divert aid, and for their own need, and it's a huge problem.
Needs in what sense?
To feed themselves, so, and from a security standpoint, that's especially with the organization that I work for, that's a big no-no. That's like something that we are consistently battling every day, because we are there to feed the people. We're not there to get involved in any of the dynamics between Hamas and the IDF. We are there to feed the people. But unfortunately, in these areas like Gaza, you're consistently battling hostile actors, who are trying to disgruntle and damage our operations.
In a normal situation, on my experience, aid agencies going to somewhere, and it is courtesy, and well, often the prerequisite is that you're doing that at the invite of the government, right? And then you would liaise, coordinate, and with the local government
Yes.
to deliver the aid to where it needs to go.
Yeah.
Is that not the case where Hamas are concerned? Then are aid agencies operating pretty much independently, and
Yeah.
Hamas are a thorn in the side?
More or less, yeah. So our coordination is done more or less through the IDF.
Is this topic all right to discuss this
Yeah.
specific? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Fine.
So in regards to aid, our coordination is more or less done through the IDF. So in fact, the IDF...
Oh, to the IDF. Okay.
Yeah, the Israelis actually are the ones pushing for aid to get into Gaza. And for us to be able to do that, we have to coordinate all types of movement with the Israelis.
That is counter to what most people would think.
Yeah. So it's a very difficult process, because if you remember, not so long ago, the borders were closed. It was closed for 70 plus days. Not one pallet of rice entered Gaza. And Gaza was more or less going into a famine, because there was a ceasefire, if you remember. Hamas more or less come back out in the open, and the ceasefire collapsed very, very quickly. And the Israelis, for whatever reason they did this for, was for, obviously, they had a reason for doing it, but they didn't open the borders. And Hamas were, the Palestinians were in trouble.
That basically didn't open the borders to the aid agencies and
Yeah.
others coming in, right?
They were closed. And
Why do you think they did that?
because a lot of the food was going to Hamas, or the Israelis believed, that the food was getting diverted, and that's very counterproductive for their operations, and what they then did is, before they put control measures in place, they closed the borders, and again, there was no food entered, because there was food in Gaza. There was food there, and they more or less ate every last grain of rice and flour before they allowed them to open, and which then did create starvation, did create people getting hungry. It's really hard being sat on the fence, because you can really look at this both sides, and obviously we're there to stay neutral, but I was I was there at the time when the borders were closed, but then I was there at the time when they opened for the first time, and you can imagine the issues that we were presented with hundreds of thousands of starving people waiting at the border, waiting to get your food. Because what would you do if your family was starving at home and they needed something? I know what I would do, and it was a very, very, very difficult time, to be able to coordinate, be able to manage all the risk, that come with feeding people. And that was my job. But to answer your question, the coordination and the permission actually comes from the IDF, and they will dictate what comes in and what comes out of the country.
Is that even across the Egyptian border?
Yes.
Really? Oh, hang on. IDF not in control of that border as well?
No.
Right?
So it'll come through, the Egyptian border or the Israeli border, but at that time it'll come to the Israelis will then have to authorize that to then continue into the Palestinian side, and obviously they've occupied, and they will control everything.
Why did I think that the Palestinians were sort of butted up right against the Egyptian border with no IDF in between?
No.
So the border on the south side there is also IDF controlled?
Yes, you've got the Egyptian, and then once you cross the Egyptian side, you then come into the Palestinian side, but obviously the IDF are controlling that.
Oh, I didn't realise that.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's through that route that most of the aid comes through, right?
Predominantly, it's an area called Karen Shalom. Yeah. And yeah, it obviously more or less come through that side. Yeah. So it's very hard to manage,
What do the Gazans, what's the Gazans relationship with Hamas like? How do they see them?
It's really hard to say, because, these were the government, these were the people that were more or less running their country. I think you're going to get good or bad reviews, whoever you speak to, but with what I'm gauging now, they just want them to go. They've
Gazans want Hamas to go.
yeah, I think they just want an end to the war. And, with whatever stance Hamas has got, it's clearly not working. It's a David and Goliath situation where no matter what they are trying to achieve, they're going to fail because they've been at war for a long time now. And, I think the people of Gaza just want an end to this war. And the only way the war is going to end is Hamas is removed, and they bring in another authority. Which I'm presuming that's what they're going to do in the next stages. And yeah, I think from my opinion, the best thing to do is to remove Hamas from being in their political control and just to stop this war because it's brutal, mate, and it's sad.
It's a real challenge if you've got a government, which essentially Hamas are, right, regardless of how effective they are at the minute, that are also a prescribed terrorist organization. It's a real drama, and it, like you're saying, it presents real problems for any progress towards peace, especially when a lot of the Western world has got sympathy. I can't speak to the rest, but has got sympathy for what's going on. What's going on in Gaza, what's going on in the West Bank, and have done it, but even more so now. But there are a significant percentage of people who think, maybe rightly so in some respect, that Hamas may not be the best people here, and may not have the best intentions at heart. I think, and also you got that ingrained distrust that IDF have of Hamas, and obviously vice versa. And what the US has got of Hamas, what the UK has got, I'm talking about at the government level, of Hamas. I agree. I mean, I don't see a path forward unless they're removed or replaced. But then there's the question that who replaces them, who chooses who's to replace them, and how do they get replaced? Because you can guarantee Hamas are not going to go, we'll go. Like, let someone else take over. It's no, that's not the way it works.
No, it's
not the way it works. Especially in that part of the world, and especially with the history and the of Hamas and how they came to power. As well, we should say that at the point we're recording this, the ceasefire started yesterday, Steve. Right, yesterday, and this is where this. Oh, sorry, not ceasefire. Yeah, ceasefire started yesterday, but also I'm pretty sure it's on the news last night. I haven't caught it this morning, but there's been the ceasefire agreement yesterday with Netanyahu. The Hamas leader, I can't remember who it is, and obviously Trump was involved there, but seems to be behind the scenes being orchestrated a lot by Tony fucking Blair of all people. Tony Blair of all people. Who might just be the savior here.
He could be the savior.
I did not have on my bingo card, by the way.
No. He could be the savior, and I think, with I think we're just desperate. I don't think who someone needs to turn up and someone needs to stop this war because, it is, you're right in what you're saying. And again, we are so neutral and we sit on the fence and I base no opinions on who the leadership, that's not for me to discuss, but with what I see, this war needs to come to an end. And I think there's desperate measures need to put into place, because ultimately a lot of innocent people are being killed because they're being caught up in stuff, and it's sad. It's really sad, when people need to step in and try and take control back, and to fix Gaza because, they're beautiful people, they're just normal people like me and you, but there's good and bad in everyone, isn't there, So yeah, it's a big, long story, and it obviously it stems back from a long time ago, but ultimately the only people that suffer is just the normal people like me and you, and it's sad.
Yeah, but as you know, and as the people of Palestine know much better than us, this has dragged on for so long. What amused me recently was where Keir Starmer recognised Palestine as a state. And I think, but we did this. We've done this before. I think in the West we play these games for our own to our own ends, for our own electorates and our own countries, but using these other places as pawns in a way. Like 2005, the UK government recognised Palestine as a state.
Yeah.
You know, and then in the 20th century, it's happened as well, and it just goes around in cycles, and it's kind of never ending. And
Yeah,
the only real situational change I see over time is that the Palestinians' situation becomes worse.
Yeah.
In that they tend to become more constricted, more smaller areas that they can live and breathe and work and whatever they want in.
Yeah.
And nothing much else changes, and I don't know how much longer that can go on. Like I said, I didn't see Tony Blair on a bingo card of people who have come forward and may actually be someone I think, oh, he's going to do a good job, because I severely detest Tony Blair, but someone, I was trying to understand the motivation to him. Someone said to me a couple of days ago, this could be like a redemption thing. He could see that he really didn't perform well.
Yeah.
Back in the early noughties.
Yeah.
And was not liked by a lot of people. And it could be that. I tend not to think that. I think there's some ulterior motives there, but it doesn't really matter. I think if you can stabilize that region, at least for a short time, and get some sort of working relationship between the Palestinians, whatever comes into power, which isn't going to be Hamas, hopefully, and Israel, and so be it. But I think on Israel's attitude needs to change too, for sure. I don't think Netanyahu has been the biggest, the biggest and best person to bring about peace in that region. I don't think he really wants it, unless it's in a way that the Palestinians don't exist. Which I'm not okay with. I'm not okay with it at all. Obviously, and a lot of people aren't okay with it. But my God, what a complex situation! What a complex situation.
It's just one to and things that listen, I'm learning every day, from not just from outside of my job, what my job remits me to do, but actually understanding the real story of why is it gone so wrong. And I have very good friends who are Palestinians, and I have very good friends who are Israelis, and from the grassroots, speaking to the normal person, before what happened on October the 7th, the Palestinians from Gaza were openly going into Israel. They were working in Israel, and they were slowly getting there to build trust and to build a relationship with each other, and you had all the stuff going on in the West Bank. I understand all that. But in regards to where they were from Gaza, they were going into Israel and they were working, when they're construction sites and doing whatever, and they were earning decent money. And then they were coming home to Gaza at the end of each day. And all that's been ruined. And that's not been ruined from the average person. It's been ruined from the de facto, from the political stance, because they didn't like they were doing that. Because they were, so I can only suggest they thought they were losing some form of control over their people.
Hamas, you mean?
Yes, Hamas. Sorry, de facto, Hamas, yeah. And that is me speaking to Palestinian friends, because I'm like, well, what's gone on? I can only read and gauge what's gone on with what I'm seeing. But I sat down for hours having conversations with Palestinians saying, will you tell me what you witnessed when you were living there? And they were happy, mate. They were happy. They were getting on with the life, and I think, and it's just such a shame, because it's not the average person that's created this. It's the political stance of power that have did what the awful atrocities of what they've done, on October the 7th when they did that, and where did they think that was going to go? It was only going to go in one direction. Imagine if someone did that to us. We'd do the same, wouldn't we? So I can see both sides of it, and the middle's just so messy where we don't really understand, because I think we're just so uneducated in everything, unless you actually dig into it properly and see where this all went wrong, which was a long, long time ago,
Late 40s.
Yeah.
Late 1940s.
It's just a mess, mate, and you can really get caught up in all that, and, I come home and people know what I do, and I have friends, who a very one-sided version of what's gone on, and I just don't say anything, because you can get caught up in it. And these people have never been there. They've never been to Israel. They've never been to Gaza. They're reading a book, or they're seeing a narrative on the TV. They don't know that exactly what's gone on. And these are the people that create hate. They create so much tension, a one-sided version, whether that's from Palestinian version or Israeli version. And actually sitting there and listening to it's quite frustrating. It's
it does show up a lot of the a lot of ignorance in people,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
also it shows. When we talk about you get those kind of responses, but it also shows up the way people will just form a strong opinion on something on the fly and absolutely stick to it without
Yeah.
thinking, do I understand this situation? Uh, you know, uh, do I need to form this kind of opinion and then hate anyone who thinks differently?
Yeah.
When I've spoken on this stuff in the past occasionally, and I put little snippets out about, particularly on this topic, like anything to do with Israel or Palestine,
Yeah.
I tend not to try to be too political on it, right? Because it's just so divisive, mate. But some of the DMs, are, like fucking hell, man.
Yeah.
From people I kind of know and respect. And you go, Jesus Christ.
It's bad.
Like he's just like, one, calm down,
Yeah.
and two, it's not that clear cut, mate.
Yeah.
With the Middle East side of thing, with the Israel Palestine thing, there are is a huge percentage of people who have formed very strong opinions on that situation there, and their only knowledge of that whole situation out there in the Middle East, it starts on the 7th of October.
Yeah.
It starts on that October 7th attack.
Yeah.
They know nothing prior.
Yeah.
They don't know anything at all. They got no context there at all. And just going off of October 7th and forming this opinion, you go, man,
Yeah.
it ain't that simple.
No.
It doesn't excuse October 7th. I'm certainly not doing that. But once you understand, I think, the complexities, and you hear from people like yourselves on the ground there, for significant lengths of time, and you go, it ain't that simple.
Yeah.
The one reality is that there are lots of fucking unhappy people there, and people's lives being disrupted on both sides of the border. On the Israeli side too.
Yeah.
It's just an incredibly sad situation, especially particularly on the Gaza side, definitely, and people in the West Bank. I've really tried. This is a topic that I in the past, until relatively recently, get really emotional over.
Yeah.
Either really angry or like upset, like genuinely. And I'm trying to stop myself doing that, because it's not healthy.
Yeah.
And the situation is probably not going to be solved in the way, like, for example, the Palestinians want it solved within my lifetime. I highly doubt it. I think the best that we can probably hope for in our lifetimes, if we give a fuck about that part of the world, is that it just stabilizes. Just stabilizes. Like, calm down, everyone. Just stop the killing.
Yeah.
What do you think about what, as a military person, what do you think about the IDF's military tactics there in Gaza? The fact that they've rubberized the entire place concerns me somewhat.
Yeah.
But I know I'm not naive. I know that their tactics relative to ours are very heavy-handed, in inverted commas, and that is to put it lightly. But I also think that maybe they've gone about it in a way that creates more problems for them, as opposed to just the military outcome they're looking for.
Yeah.
Internationally, it doesn't seem to have done them very good in terms of international reputation, should we say. What's your thoughts of him being there?
Again, if we sat a Palestinian here and we sat an Israeli here, I'm pretty sure you could listen to both of them and go, okay, I get both sides. And from a military man, let's not forget what we did in Iraq. I went to Iraq. You went to Iraq. Okay.
Where are you going with this?
No, but I'm just saying,
yeah.
Let's not forget. Okay. We have been a part of something that, in my opinion, and I've got a right to have an opinion because I was in that war, is, do I think that we should have gone into Iraq? Absolutely not.
Do you think we should have what? Sorry?
I just don't think we should have ever been into Iraq.
Okay.
And I think we all, without getting into it, but I think we all know the reasons why.
I'm inclined to agree with you.
Okay. So, we are two ex-military men who have been a part of multiple campaigns. And as we've progressed and got older, we can base our opinions on that. Now let's look at Gaza. I get it. From any military occupation, it's going to be very heavy-handed, and the Israelis have lost a lot of soldiers, through this war, and the Palestinians have lost a lot of people, and it's just, yeah, it's relentless and it's very brutal. Like, let's base it on Gaza City. The thing that's the Gaza City, the occupation, sorry, the huge offensive that's just taken place. And one of the first things that they did was absolutely flattened every high-rise building there. Is that a tactic we would use in Iraq? You know, I'm not sure. I don't think we flattened every single building, but the reasons why the Israelis did it, in my opinion, was because Gaza is so small. And in fact, the Hamas have got very, very well trained snipers, and when they're sitting off in these high buildings, picking off Israeli soldiers, that's their reasons behind that. Do we understand that? Well, yeah, I do actually, and I think they're at a point where, and this is just based on my opinion, they're at a point now where they're not going to take any more casualties, unnecessary casualties from a military perspective. But then look at it from a Palestinian perspective. These people are having their homes flattened because of a couple of bad actors who don't care about them, and, Hamas will go into these high-rise buildings and, so what do you do? From a soldier on the ground, what would we do? And from a Palestinian living in these flats, you're like this, aren't you? You see both sides of the story, but it is heavy-handed, but war is heavy-handed. Look at what's going on in Ukraine. Brutal, so yes, I understand that, but I think any occupying force would do the same, especially in today's war, which is a lot different than maybe when me and you were in Iraq or Afghanistan. It's very different. It's a different setting. I think that answers the question. It's a difficult one, mate. It's really difficult.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. Playing devil's advocate and looking at, I'm going to use that phrase, playing devil's advocate and looking at it from the Israeli side. Or let's pretend it's us,
Yeah.
when you're fighting we've been in situations like Afghanistan. You're fighting an enemy which doesn't wear uniform.
Yeah.
They blend in with the local population.
Can't see
They've got
'em.
freedom of movement.
Yeah.
It is extremely challenging, and it was even more challenging for us. Like, let's think of Afghanistan, for example, because we played by the rule book.
Yeah.
We weren't as heavy-handed as what Israel are. Like, for example, we wouldn't go and flatten a high rise. Not that there were high rises in like Helmand,
Yeah.
but we were really careful about collateral damage and ensuring that civilians weren't going to get hurt and injured. Flattening a building because you got shot at from it
Yeah.
is highly unusual in my experience. It's not to say it didn't happen,
Yeah.
but it was unusual, unless you could absolutely guarantee that there was no civilians in there and there was no other way to take out whoever was in there, then you wouldn't do it, let alone a high rise. Did that make our lives more difficult? Absolutely did.
Yeah.
If it had been if it had all been sort of urban warfare that we were doing out there, would we have lost a lot more soldiers taking that approach? Yes, we would have. And that is kind of the situation that Israel are finding themselves in trying to combat Hamas. It is not easy from the military perspective. Not that I've got any fucking sympathy whatsoever with the Israelis. I can be completely open and honest about it. I think it's just the heavy-handedness is just way over the top. I think the rebelization is partly a tactic to get to turn the Palestinians against Hamas.
Yeah.
Again, for political reasons. That may be a good thing, but the manner in which they're doing it, I mean, it just resets the whole place. How would you rebuild? And Trump going on about rebuilding the place. Oh yeah, flick of a switch, send money in, cool. No, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't bring back possessions. It doesn't bring back homes. It doesn't bring back livelihood. It doesn't bring back the shops. It doesn't bring back the work and the employment and all that. It's literally ruined.
It's going to take a long time, isn't it?
Yeah, Trump money isn't going to work on that. Not at all. What do you think is the way forward? Like, if you could flick a switch, wave a wand, and resolve the situation there in the short term, how would you do it?
In Gaza?
Yeah. Or if you were the Israelis, if you could control what the Israelis were doing, or if you could control what Hamas were doing, or what Gaza are doing, or what international governments are doing, what would you do?
I think a two-state solution is probably the best thing. and
A two-state solution.
yeah, something that's been going on for a long, long time, in regards to the arguments towards a two-state, and bringing in an external body, to sort of take control of the country. Hamas just need to go. Like, and if I could wave a wand, they just need to go, because they bring nothing but problems to the country. I think we need to rebuild from the start, and I think it's going to take a long, long time for trust to be rebuilt from a country that sits as a neighboring country to Israel, and it's difficult. It's really difficult, and it's going to take a long time. But my first thing would be to completely remove Hamas and to put another governing body, which is then governed by the Americans or by the Brits, or similar to what we did in Iraq. When ISAF, when we were sort of there as a part of an external overwatch to make sure things are going right in the right direction, if that makes sense. It's tough.
I see. Yeah, I see what you're saying. When I because of the influence that Israel has on those places you just mentioned, UK, US, I don't think that would be a great idea for Palestinians. But also, Palestinians aren't the only one. They're not. Let's say it's two-state. They're not the only state there. The Israelis also need watching, which is but they do need watching. Part of the reason that the situation is the way it is. It's not entirely down to Palestinians or Hamas. Hamas haven't been around, weren't there since the start of the Palestine-Israel problem.
Yeah.
They're a relatively recent development. I say obviously they're an evolution of other organizations there, but again, Israel need watching too. They need strict oversight, which they won't allow.
Yeah.
They won't allow it.
Yeah.
They won't allow it because it doesn't let them do what they want to do. It's, I mean, I don't see what option is other than a two-state solution. What's a one-state look like? Because Israel aren't going to go anywhere. So where do the Palestinians go?
Yeah.
It's hard. Like, what the fuck is going on? What are we talking about?
I don't think there is I don't think there's a textbook answer to any of this. It's just, you're just trying to find a better end of a rubbish deal. It's what can we do?
Like, if I could wave a wand, it would be I think it would be right. Palestinians have the east of that land.
Yeah.
That is the Israel and Palestine land. Have the east, obviously, right? So that would mean Gaza would go to the Israelis, right? But you split it down the middle, give Palestinians the east, give the Israelis the west, and down the middle is this massive iron wall.
Yeah.
It's like
like a huge
it's like, when you separate the kids.
Yeah.
It's like, right, you go in that room, you go in that room, you both calm down, get on with your lives. The door is staying shut and it's not going to open back up until you've both matured a little bit.
Yeah.
Literally.
How
so it's
easy
not
would that
possible
be?
to interact with each other.
Yeah.
Having said that, practically speaking, that gives Palestine no ports.
Yeah. It's a tough one, isn't it? I think if we had that wand, that's what we do.
I don't really mean that directly. We're split, by the way. Fucking hell.
It's tough, isn't it? What do you do? And it's so difficult, mate. It really is.
No, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to turn out. Peace is the first thing. Chill out.
Peace, yeah.
Chill out.
Everyone just stop, and with what I've seen, the only people that are getting caught up in all this is the innocence of children and women and men who are just trying to get and earn a living and put food on the table for the families, and it seems to me that these are the only people really suffering, and it's terror, it's bad.
Are the Israelis, are they deploying drone technology and ground and air drone technology? The reason I'm not asking about Hamas is because Hamas would probably have problems getting that equipment in to be able to use it, right?
Yeah.
But are the Israelis using that kind of technology?
I believe they use drones, yeah. I can only imagine someone as advanced as Israel are using drones, Who isn't these days? I think drone warfare is a thing out there, but I think they're very sophisticated in their ability to use drone warfare and AI. But I know very little about that because that's not the space. In Ukraine, I know a lot about it because that was the space I was working in. But I can only presume that they are using it for whether that's surveillance, whether that's for attack drones, whatever it may be. But there is drones because when I go into Gaza, you can hear the drones. But a lot of them are sort of surveillance drones that we hear. You can sort of tell with how they sound like a distant lawnmower, like the Orlan 10 or whatever drone that may be. But yeah, I presume they're using them for a lot of military ways, to gain their military tactics and stuff.
Would you prefer to be a soldier on the ground in Gaza or a soldier on the ground in Donbass?
A soldier on the ground in Gaza.
You're gonna say that based on
I'd
some
take
of
that
those
all
ice
day,
cream
mate.
questions.
Yeah, I'd take that all day, because Ukraine's a completely different.
When did you first go out there?
To Gaza?
Yeah, when was the first? No, Ukraine. When was the first time you were out there?
2022. The war kicked off on February 24th. Well, as a continuation of. In fact, what I didn't know when I went to Ukraine was the Ukraine and Russia have actually been at war for 12 years before the conflict in 2022. So on 24th of February 2022, as we all know that Russia invaded Ukraine, where in fact it was a continuation of a war that was already happening in Donbass, which no one talks about,
The media conveniently declined to mention that.
Yeah,
They would prefer it to be this big start point, and
it's a continuation of
no. Much the same as, kind of the same as Israel-Palestine, October 7th. No,
yeah.
fucking way before.
It's not. It didn't start on October the 7th. This has been going on a long time, and it's the same with Ukraine. I believe it was 2000, and I could be wrong. I believe the Donbass war started in 2012. As they were fighting for land. And everyone talks about 24th of February 2022, including me. I was so naive to what was actually going on in front of me, where in fact it's just a continuation of a war that's lost hundreds of thousands of people, men and women, for fighting for a bit of scorched earth. So to answer your question, mate, I deployed to Ukraine in I think it was like the 27th of February 2022, a couple of days after they invaded. I'd sort of, when I left the army in 2014, did what we all do, went and jumped on the circuit to Iraq and Afghanistan on various diplomatic and oil and gas contracts.
One sec. What is that chair squeaking against?
Is that? Can you hear it on the mic?
Yeah.
I think it's just me.
It's your cranium, mate. That's what it is.
It's what? Let me swap it.
No, sorry. No, go on. Sorry.
And and sort of Iraq, Afghanistan, various diplomatic and oil and gas contracts, and my mate phoned me.
Oh, so you went out on the circuit to Ukraine?
No. So when I left the army in 2014,
right,
I sort of then filtered into the close protection.
Sorry, okay, right.
Yeah, deployed back to all the places that I never said I was going to go back to, which is Iraq and Afghanistan. And then when I come home from Iraq on one of my rotations, I was sat at home. I mean, one of my mates was out in Ukraine, and they sort of preempted this war was going to happen with sort of analysts and intelligence that they had for a company that he was working for. And then it did happen, and then they invaded. And more or less, that's how I ended up. It was just a gig for me. It was just another gig to put food on the table. What I didn't know what the next 3 years looked like. So when I asked to come out to Ukraine, I was like, yeah, mate, I'll come Ukraine. I was like, oh, buzzing, I've got this contract out in Ukraine. And very, very quickly, I thought, oh, shit, like, what have I done? I remember driving into Ukraine, sort of, I got tasked to pick up this armoured vehicle, and I drove to Kyiv. And this is when I started working for CNN. And I always remember, mate, driving into Ukraine. I mean, when I got in, sort of everyone was fleeing. I drove in, straight in, mate, no traffic. There's only a lunatic driving in. Even the border were like, so where are you going? Like, are you sure you want to go in? I'm like, yeah, like, everything's cool. So I went to Lviv, as I went to Lviv, so the next day drove to Ukraine, into Kyiv. And the Kyiv was getting smashed, mate. It was getting hit hard. Have you ever been to Kyiv?
No.
Mate, the most beautiful country, most beautiful city you'll ever see.
I've got a friend who goes out there relatively regularly, for security reasons.
Yeah.
And quite often he's in a hotel in Kyiv.
Yeah.
And he says the same thing. He's like, most amazing place.
London, mate.
I mean, the last time he said it was about a year ago. I'm thinking, mate, what? Even now?
Yeah, yeah,
He loves it. He loves it. Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
It's beautiful, and I was very, again, naive. I use that word a lot because like the new sort of war that we see ourselves in today, and I was like, "Oh, this is nice." It's like London. It's beautiful, mate. I was expecting to drive into some place. I was like, never even heard of Ukraine before, which I had, but I didn't really think much of it.
Yeah.
And I remember driving in to Kyiv, mate, and my mate phoned me and said, listen, like, stay off this road. The Russians are there. The tanks are on the road. I was like, okay. And I just didn't know what I was getting myself into, mate. And I always remember driving the southern route to hit one of the routes to avoid the route where the Russians were. And I had the radio on, bit of background noise as we were driving. And this alarm come through the radio. And as it come through the radio, it actually started ringing outside. And what happens is when the air raid alarm goes off, it cuts everything and it tells people that there's incoming fire wherever that may come from. I didn't know what it was. That's how much of a brief we got. I didn't know what it was. But then I realised very,
and it was
very
speaking in Ukrainian.
Everyone's in Ukrainian.
Yeah.
And we're in this little city. I don't know where we were as we were transitioning from Lviv to Kyiv. And I heard, and it's the most frightening thing I've ever heard. Echoes of World War II, everything that we've seen on the TV, everything that we learned in school. And I'm looking up and this building with sandbags all up it. And you've got these territorial defense guys with like a really old Kalashnikov.
Like Dad's army.
Like Dad's army looking at us thinking we're like Russian, like special forces or something. We weren't. We were just, but they're not used to seeing people like us in there. Tattoos, baseball caps on, driving armored vehicles. They're like, who are these guys? And it was frightening me, and at that moment I'd realized, oh shit, like I'm very used to working in the Middle East. I'm very used to working in Afghanistan. I'm not used to working in a conventional setting where and at that moment I thought, what am I doing? It dawned on me that what I was going into was really dangerous. We were coming up against the biggest, one of the biggest armies in the world that are invading this tiny country called Ukraine, and they didn't stand a chance. And at the moment in time, they were 17 kilometers away from Kyiv. They were 17.
That is nothing.
Yeah, they were there, mate. And when you've got a T-90 battle tank, with its guns facing the city, that's nothing, mate. These, 40, 50 kilometers, these rounds can go. Very, very quickly, I was like, oh, what am I doing here? I sort of met my mate and he was like, hey, up, pal. I'm like, mate, this is a bit rough, innit? And straight away, you sort of assigned to a journalist. And that's when I found myself in Ukraine, and for the next 3 years, it was insane.
Think of the number of people, mate, who have gone out there, who don't have your experience, prior knowledge to have that, oh my God, what am I doing in your moment?
Yeah.
Think of the number of people that have gone out there to go and fight with the Ukrainians because they played a bit of COD. Yeah. They do a bit of, and this is absolute reality. And they played some, they do some airsofting and they go out there because they want to go and fight the good fight and they weren't able to join the military or whatever. And they go out there and they don't have that foresight or they don't have that knowledge to go, how far away is 17 kilometers? And they think, oh, it's not far. And also, they don't understand what death really is.
Yeah.
You can respawn in a fucking video game. You can respawn in airsoft. And like, it sounds like I'm joking you, but you will know better than I will. These people go out there.
Yeah.
There's even military people, ex-military, who go out there because they did nothing when they were in.
Yeah.
They feel they've got a chip in their shoulder and they want to go out there and prove themselves to themselves and have zero experience whatsoever and end up in a fucking body bag. Yeah. It's so sad, mate. It's so sad. It's so sad. And it must happen all of the time. And not just with British, Americans and all sorts. It's just wild, mate. Wild.
And
yet you stayed there.
Yeah. I was stupid enough to stay there and get me and just dig myself a bigger and bigger and bigger hole as time went on.
What do you mean? In what way?
Just with the risks, and when I went in 2022, it was more or less, we were just trying to figure out what was going on. And, I actually remember being sat in the Intercon Hotel, the Intercontinental. And, we were actually making plans to evacuate. We were the last media team in there. with CNN. Everyone had gone
Where's this?
in Kyiv.
In Kyiv, yeah.
Yeah. And I remember sitting there with my mate, and as we looked out of the window on the 10th floor, we could see a place called Boryspil, over the right bank of the Dnipro River, and you could just every night, you know, and the Russians were advancing. They were more or less circling the city.
So why did CNN decide to stay until the
Because
last?
we decided to stay because we're just trying to figure out, you know, risk versus reward, you know, how long we could possibly stay there for before we actually bugged out, because we didn't really know what was happening. And that's exactly what we did. And as we were making these plans to sort of evacuate and move back towards Lviv, because you know, the risks were more or less too dangerous to stay, the Russians left. They just turned around and went.
Why do you think that was?
I don't know. Maybe because there's a lots of rumors, there's a lot of hearsay. To answer your question, I don't know. They believe that they were met with an overwhelming force that was going to come and push them out of Kyiv. The Ukrainians did a fantastic job, mate, in regards to defending the city. And more or less, when the Russians come in, you know, they sort of come in and they were doing everything that we would do within a conventional setting. You know, their planes were taken off, you know, when they were trying to resupply their ground units, take over sort of various strategical airports, you know, and the only people sort of keeping these Russian, you know, the Russian forces at bay was like, again, your territorial defense forces, your guards, you know, and in fact, the Ukrainians were met by an overwhelming force, and for some reason, they managed to push them back before they got sort of reinforcements that had come in from other areas. Because don't forget, the war was raging in Kharkiv. They attacked, I think it was on 7 fronts, with Kyiv being one of them. So all their sort of main bulk of soldiers went racing to the east, where they didn't anticipate they were going to come through, you know, from the north. You know, and that's exactly what they did. You know, they come through Belarus, you know, and it caught them off guard because they never thought they would do that. Because actually, to come through Belarus into Kyiv, they had to go over the ground. It's that marshland. It's actually really difficult to get through. But for some reason, they managed to do it because they were met with so little resistance. And that's how they got into Borodyanka. That's how they got into Irpin and Busha. You know, and it took the Ukrainians quite some time to sort themselves out, to then go back and push them back. And you've got to take your hands off. You know, you've got to tip your hat to the Ukrainians. Like, they are warriors, mate. Like, they are tough people, you know, and they will fight, you know, to the death because they've got something to fight for. That's their country, you know. And you know, I believe, you know, with the war, where the war is at now, that is because of how personal it was with what the Russians did in 2022 when they come into Kyiv. You know, with what they did in Busha and Borodyanka and all those places where they committed these terrible war crimes. So when you actually sit on a table and say, well, let's end the war, the Ukrainians, well, hang on a minute. Like,
so what do they do in these places?
They committed, so when the Russians come in and occupied these areas, beautiful suburbs and the outer cities, you know, the outer limits of Kyiv, you know, the Russians come in occupied, and they occupied them for a number of weeks. And they committed some awful war crimes, mate, you know, towards men, women, and children. I'll let your imagination take place on what they did. But what they did was completely, it's just inhumane. You know, nobody should have ever done what they did. And they did do that because I was a part of a team that went and did stories on these mass graves that we found in some of the horrific war crimes that they did, you know. And you know, so again, when people talk about negotiations and let's end the war at a political level, fine. But actually from the ground level, from a soldier, that they're not going to take that lightly, because they won't forget of some of these things that they've done to friends, families, people that they know. So in fact, it's actually very difficult to convince the Ukrainians to probably stop, because like, no, this is well personal. Look at what they've done.
You see that in the we were talking on the icebreaker about, you know, everything just gets streamed or is available afterwards as a nice HD recording. You see the way that a lot of the captured Russian soldiers are treated by the Ukrainians.
Yeah.
You go, Oh my God. I kind of get it, but also, oh my God, this is another level.
Yeah.
And this is the reality of all out war,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? You actually saying, you were saying on the icebreaker, you said trench warfare isn't what we deem it to be. What did you mean by that?
Can I go to the toilet?
Yes,
Yes.
I'm gonna
I'm
toilet,
dying
mate.
for a wee, mate.
Yeah, we'll pause. Okay. All right, mics are back on. We were just talking off air. So you having a live on air brain fart earlier talking about the defense of Kyiv.
Yeah.
So go back over that again.
So I was just trying to say, I think a significant battle, for the reasons why the Russians didn't take control of Kyiv was the Battle of Hostomel Airport. So when we were in Kyiv and I told you we were making the decision making on whether we should evacuate or not, because the Russians were making significant ground, what was going on in a place called Hostomel was there was a huge battle where the Russian airborne units, the paratroopers and that, those type of units were coming in on the helicopters, and they were sent to secure Hostomel Airport, whilst their equivalent of their C-17, C-130s were circling above, with the resupply, the ammunition, the troops, and they went down to secure the airport. Now, what they didn't know was the resistance that they were going to meet weren't against Ukrainian soldiers. They were against Sergei, who was a security guard on the airport.
Sergei being like the generic name for
generic sort of
yeah.
Sergei or Vyacheslav or there's some
Average
random bloke with an old Kalashnikov, which he probably didn't even know if it worked or not. And his job was just to secure the airport as a bit of external security, and some of the territorial defense that were based in and around the area at the time. So when the Russians sort of landed to secure the airport, to fix it so the planes could land, because Hostomel was the only one with the biggest runway to land the planes, the Ukrainian soldiers were more or less a 90-minute drive away. That's where the closest unit was, because a lot of their resources went to the east to backfill Kharkiv, because the Russians were trying to come through Kharkiv as well. And it's a fascinating story, mate. And more or less, Sergei and his Oppo were keeping these paratroopers sort of an elite sort of unit within the Russian army.
So they jumped onto the airfield?
They were actually on the airfield. And then there was a huge fight. And they did take control of it at some point. But when the shout went out to these Ukrainian soldiers, who I believe were in a place called Vinnytsia, were making their way to Hostomel, they got themselves within range to sort of hit the runway with mortars. So then they couldn't land the planes. So as these planes, the equivalent of the C-17s, C-130s, were coming in to try and land, it was a time-sensitive mission, because they knew they had to get these mortars off to destroy the runway so the planes couldn't land. It's little stories like this, mate, that don't get told. And if they failed in that mission, the Russians would have landed those planes, and the likelihood is they would have probably taken control of a lot more of Kyiv. And these soldiers got back, and they managed to destroy the runway, and they managed to backfill Sergei and his Oppo, who were protecting the runway, and the territorial defense. And then they actually went on an offensive, a counter-offensive, and took control of the runway and the airport. And they managed to push them out of an area called Hostomel.
24th of Feb, it says here. So 24th of February, Russian paratroopers launched a surprise. I never did know anything about this. Russian paratroopers launched a surprise airborne assault on Hostomel Airport, also known as Antonov Airport, located approximately 10 miles northwest of Kyiv. Initially successful, the assault began around 0500 local time, following a missile strike on the airport and the nearby National Guard base.
Yeah.
There's Sergei.
Yeah. Wipe some of them out, but a few of them got out, and instead of running away.
Yeah, despite initial success in securing the airfield, the Russian paratroopers faced significant resistance from Ukrainian forces, Ukrainian defenders, including local fighters and special forces, quickly mobilized, encircling the isolated Russian unit. There was an intelligence failure. Basically, the paratroopers got fucking killed, or they had to bug out to nearby forests.
They got their arse handed to them, mate. They did, and initially they took control of the airport, but they very quickly lost it, and but it's these little stories, mate, that are going to come out years and years later, significant events that prevented them from taking control of Kyiv.
Yeah, the failure to hold the airfield was a major setback for Russia as it prevented the planned airlift of up to 2,000 troops, fucking brigade,
Brigade,
and
mate, good to go.
significant military equipment. The Antonov AN-225 Maria, the world's largest aircraft, was reportedly destroyed during the fighting.
Yeah, it was.
Oh,
Yeah, it was.
mate.
Yeah.
My God. My God.
Fascinating, mate.
Yeah, the stories that don't get told,
Yeah.
right? Don't get told. What's Ukraine like now? The last time you were out there, which is relatively recently, compared to the last time you were compared to the first time you were there. There must be some serious fatigue setting in, surely.
So when I was last in Ukraine was March, April of this year, as in Donbass, and we were focused on the Battle of Pokrovsk, which is a huge battle, which is still ongoing. Absolutely brutal, mate.
When you say you're focused, it's part of media.
Part of the media teams,
Okay.
yeah. I was with the New York Times at this point, and our focal point was the Battle of the ongoing battle in Donbass. At that particular time, it was Pokrovsk. Pokrovsk is a strategic stronghold because it dominates high ground, and the Russians are trying to take control of it. And they have met with huge resistance. But, as we going into the third year of the war, their ability of robotic warfare, drone warfare is just frightening, and
You were saying in the icebreaker, they're using ground drones as well, right?
yeah,
Okay.
they use ground drones to attack, to Kazivac, for surveillance.
When you say ground drone, give me an example.
A ground drone is what we would know as a remote control vehicle, which is being drove at distance, and those vehicles are used, I've seen vehicles
like cars.
Like cars.
Okay, right, that big. All right.
Big mini trucks, which are being remotely driven. They've either got a equivalent of a 7.62 GPMG on top of it, 30
I did not know this was the case, mate.
30mm chain gun. Some of these, like we've been embedded with these units, then absolutely relentless. So when we say drone, we instantly think, a drone in the sky. Where in fact, the Ukrainian sea drones by sea, has more or less depleted the Russians' Black Fleet. Unbelievable, mate. Robotic war. And this is the new phase of what we are seeing with advanced technologies. Things that we do not think about, with the capability of AI. We're not fighting the war anymore. It's a robotic war, and we are seeing it in Ukraine. And these land drones are fascinating. They will go in Kazivac, injured soldiers off the battlefield, where they're able to get onto a platform, and then they're driven back, because Ukraine's the most mined country in the world right now. There's mines everywhere. And when I say everywhere, they're everywhere. You can't move. So
Are the Russian surface dropping them?
Yeah.
As in from the plane, they're dropping from the air?
Yes.
Yeah.
So one of their common tactics from both sides is you'll get these drones now that will more or less fly and carry mines, and they will just litter mines onto main supply routes. And obviously you've got a convoy coming, drone will drop it, and then, and very clever. If you look at trench warfare, which we briefly touched on, you've got drones that are able to fly a butterfly mine, a 5 kilogram, anti-personnel mine into a trench position, and they'll drop it into a dugout, or where these guys are sleeping. They'll get out in morning routine, boom, and that's been dropped there that night because they now have nighttime capability. So when we used to do our 5 and 20s, which is embedded into us, even now, 5 and 20s, 5 and 20s, 5 and 20s.
Explain 5 and 20s for the civilians who listen to this.
Well, your 5 meter and 20 meter checks. So your 5 meter checks is looking to your immediate ground, and then your 20 meter checks is looking for whatever's around. And this is where we're looking for
Literally looking around for threat. You know?
IEDs, the presence of the abnormal, and all that good stuff. That more or less saved my life in Ukraine, and because, again, it's just littered with so much mines and foreign objects and things that will more or less kill you. That booby traps, huge in Ukraine. And we've come across plenty of them, these sort of pressure release ones, which is a classic for the Russians when they're leaving and when they're retreating from occupied areas. And obviously that's built in us through our Northern Ireland days, through our Iraq days. No, don't touch that, and they can see, there's typically a grenade, bit of weight on it, and it's that nice shiny thing that you see. Oh, that's shiny, I'm going to go and touch it. Well, civvies have got that, like we have, but it's programmed into us not to touch it, and we come across that a lot in Ukraine. I think this is why they need people like us to be out there, because we identify these things because of the experience that we've got dating back from Northern Ireland days. And a lot of stuff that we're seeing even in that setting mirrors of what we see in Ukraine. So yeah, when we talk about robotic war and when we talk about trench warfare, it's not just the fact that we've got these drones that will drop a grenade on top of you, but you've got your Shahed 136 drones, which are so dangerous, mate. The Iranian drones, you've seen them, yeah?
No.
They can fly from out of Russia, and they will fly into Kyiv. I think they've got a range of like 2,000 kilometers on them. And they are big. It would fill this room, the wingspan and they're produced. They en masse. The warehouses full of them, and when you look at a Patriot missile, which is £5 million for one launch, well, you can make hundreds of these drones, which is an 80-kilogram warhead, is very capable. It's a loitering drone, okay, which it can identify and pinpoint more or less its own targets, or digitally programmed. You don't even, and they just fly, and they'll use the ground as terrain to get themselves into targets, and Kyiv's getting smashed with them most nights, mate. So when you're seeing drone attacks in Kyiv, these are the Iranian Shahed drones that are doing that, and very capable. If it hit this building, it would more or less, a couple of them hit it, it would collapse it, or they'll cause it significant damage. And so drone warfare, what we call robotic warfare, is the new war.
What vehicles are they using for the land drones? Well, like, what's easiest to convert? Have you seen them?
I've seen them, yeah.
What they're using?
So
don't say Hilux.
No. Well,
I imagine it's got to be something with quite a lot of electronics.
So let me tell you something what the Russians are doing.
Okay.
So as we know, a VBIED, okay, something that we've come across all of our military career. What the Russians do, okay, I've not seen the Ukrainians do it, but what the Russians intend to do is they will pack tanks, whether that's a T-70, whatever, a tank, T-90 battle tank, whatever. They'll pack a tank full of mines, okay, and it'll remotely drive that tank towards a trench position where they know the Ukrainians are.
God.
So like it's more or less they can remotely drive it, and then you've got a tank driving towards a trench position, and then it will detonate on arrival. This is what we're seeing.
That is,
it's frightening, mate.
Right.
And so when I say
tanks are frightening enough as it is, let alone being packed with explosives.
Mines. Yeah, absolutely packed. And they will use, whatever vehicle they've got available, whether it's a Hilux, whether it's a Lada, whatever that may be, because they're continuously thinking outside the box. It's so dangerous to move. You can't move anywhere in Ukraine now because you've been pinged by a drone the minute you move. So the robotic war and using these drones, whether that's to assist you, whether that's to extract people or to take the fight to the enemy, this is what they're doing, and it goes against any form of sort of conventions that we're used to. It's just like, it's free for all, mate. It's mental, and, a drone can travel at 140 kilometers an hour. It's going to outdo you in a vehicle. And
they're all predominantly wire flown, right? As in the ones the Ukrainians are using on the infantry subunit level, section, platoon level, right?
Yeah. But you've got, so when we used to use ECM, the electronic countermeasures, which sends out jammers to the radio frequencies. I've seen drones develop from the minute I stepped into that country up until now. And in fact, the advancement of drone warfare, what they do now is they figured out that when you send countermeasures in to jumble the frequency, which the drones were dropping out of the sky. Have you heard of the fiber optic drones that they're using?
That's what I mean, wire flown, yeah.
This is new. This is a new development. It's a new TTP. It's a new measure. So you're continuously fighting countermeasures. Yeah. So they'll do that. Well, we'll do this, and that is just continuous in Ukraine. And what they started doing was with the fiber optic drones, which the only way I can explain to the audience is it's a fishing wire on the back of a drone. It's launched and it's driven remotely.
Yeah, so, fiber optic cable.
Fiber optic
cable.
cables.
Thin as a fishing wire. You can barely see it.
You can barely see it. These have got 40, 50 kilometer of reel and
kilometers. That long.
Oh, mate. Yeah. Continuously developing 40, 50 kilometers of reel, okay, of fiber optic cable. You cannot see it, with your tracking devices, So if we've got scanners that it will tell you that there's a drone. It's a 2 o'clock sort of drone this time, and that's picking up on the radio frequency that drone is giving out from the tracking devices that we've got. Where fiber optic cable, there's no ability to track, there's no ability to mitigate, there's no ability to be able to electronic countermeasures don't work. So in fact, you're blind. The only way you can pick these drones up is by radar. Where on the ground level, you're not going to have a radar.
You don't have radar, no.
So in fact, the fiber optic drones is the new type of drone, and the only way you're going to see that drone is when you hear it, when it's more or less on top of you. And that's the frightening thing. And I think out of the 3 years that I've been in Ukraine, that was the biggest time I felt vulnerable, when the fiber optic drones come out, because we had no way of detecting a drone was in the sky, and the payload that they carry, armored vehicle or no armored vehicle, you get it, it's game over.
Are the Russians targeting journalists?
Yeah.
Are they?
Yeah. A French journalist was killed a week ago.
But they're actively targeting. It's not like accidental kills.
No. So, and that is due to experiences that I've seen, and
what do you mean? It's due to
when I've been in.
So that it's targeted.
Severodonetsk, and we actually employed a tactic where we don't carry press signs, and we take press signs off our vehicles. We take press signs off our body armor because it didn't keep us safe anymore. So there is sufficient evidence to suggest that they do target journalists and media teams. A lot of journalists have been killed out.
So the logic is that if they see that, they know you're an easy target and an easy kill, basically.
I know. Listen,
because you're not. The assumption is you're not military.
Yeah. So I don't think it's an easy kill. I think it's, journalists have got a super high risk job. Okay, and I understand that the majority have probably been killed due to crossfire and being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I know that there's been instances where they have been actively targeted, hunted and killed, where they've openly got press signs on the car, and, it's as clear as day. We're press, we've got no other reasons to move around to pretend we're press, we're media, but everything that we do is at our own risks. And we understand that comes part and parcel with war, but they do actively target, and that is stuff that I have seen firsthand. And so it's dangerous, mate.
What about non-Western press teams out there?
Say again?
What about non-Western press teams out there? Russian, Chinese, anywhere else? Do you come across them much?
Yeah. There's a lot.
I'm assuming that Al Jazeera is out there, for example.
Al Jazeera out there.
They're not Western, obviously.
Yeah, there's a lot of media. Everybody's out there. Everybody's out there. All the media, whether they're Al Jazeera, whether they're from Chinese.
Russians as well.
Not Russians aren't on the Ukrainian side. So, we but obviously there's their side, you know. And listen, some of their journalists have been killed, you know, probably been caught up in wrong place, wrong time. And I can only speak for what I see, you know. But you know, I think journalists in the time of war are very good at exposing people's right and wrongs, you know. And I believe that at times it's probably in their own interest, and that's why they become targeted. You know, it's really dangerous, mate. You know, and these are things that we're continuously mitigating. You know, every time you're working with a profile journalist, or every time you're working with journalists that spin a certain narrative, because that's what they're there to do, they can quite easily become a target. You know, and you've always got to put that in your forward thinking. You know, of how am I going to protect this journalist because of what their job is to do. And I've had that myself. You know, where it's like, well, I'm going to work with this journalist differently than what I was with this journalist, and all becomes a part of your planning. You know, and of risk, and which is it's mental, mate. Yeah,
I can imagine.
yeah.
You talking on the icebreaker, you mentioned you were talking about Donbass, and you were saying it sounded to me like you're insinuating that the representation of the battle that had gone on at Donbass in the media was not actually what was going on the ground at the time. Was it? So, is that correct? Was that correct to say?
Just elaborate on that a bit, mate.
I think you were saying that people didn't understand what was really going on in Donbass during that battle there, because you were in the area at the time, right?
Yeah. So is this as a continuation of what's happened in 2022, or yeah? So yeah, you know, listen, I was naive and maybe ignorant to understand what was going on in Ukraine when I went. I just turned up. You know, I didn't actually know what was going on. I knew there was a war, but what I didn't know was it is a continuation of a 10-year war at that time. But as I progressed and moved over to the east to Donbass, yeah, Donbass is dangerous, mate. You know, and I would say that the Battle of Donbass is more or less the Russians' primary aim to take control of Donbass. You know, where you've got, you know, heavy fighting in Kramatorsk at the minute, Sloviansk, Bakhmut. You know, if you look at Bakhmut, you know, the Battle of Bakhmut, they lost over 1 million soldiers. 1 million soldiers to fight for Bakhmut. You know, and
What?
mental, mate. You know,
The Russians.
yes, to take control and take over. Oh, sorry, 100,000 soldiers. Sorry,
A million. That's
a million soldiers have been killed.
So 100,000.
Over 100,000 soldiers. You know, Russian soldiers.
Have they confirmed that?
It's a local source.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, for the Battle of Bakhmut. You know, that's. But obviously, you've got to look at how many Ukrainian soldiers have been killed to defend it. And I was in Bakhmut when it was Ukrainian. No bigger than a small town, you know, but from the strategical value, it was so important they took control of Bakhmut. And, you know, like, these are fierce battles, mate, that have been fought over time. And so yeah, you know, Donbass is a serious place, mate. And that is where I would say the main front of the war is at the minute.
What is the feeling? What do you think about the relevance of that side of the country being predominantly or significantly ethno-Russian? Because that's why the focus is on the East, right? And this is one of the premises that this has been cited as a repeated reason by Putin. For one of the reasons that he goes in and has become kinetic in these areas and Georgia as well, where it's under the guise of protecting Russian people, right? And then there's the claim to those areas. There's Russians there. They need protection. They're not being treated well by Ukrainians, so I'm going to protect my people.
Yeah.
That's kind of mainly the argument here on Putin's side, right? So what's your opinion of it? I don't mean whether you think that's right or wrong, but not for your opinion. What's your experience of that argument and that dynamic where it comes to your interaction with the soldiers and the people of Ukraine and anyone else is there at the moment?
So I'd say these areas are very pro-Russian. And again, without getting into the history and the politics of it, you know, I know there's a lot of history when it comes to certain areas of Donbass. You know, and the Russians believe that it's theirs and they want to annex it to be theirs. But then obviously they've had this back and two for years. ultimately at this moment in time it's Ukrainian land, and they will stand by that it's their land. The Russians will stand by that no, in fact it's ours. And this is what we're seeing at the minute, but with what I've noticed, especially over in Donbass, is they are very pro-Russian. They speak Russian, and I would suggest that a lot of them are aligned to be Russian. So that's what I've seen, and I've stayed in Donbass a lot, and my presence was fine, but you always get that sort of feeling that it is very pro-Russian, and you just get that feeling, when you're in these areas.
Sorry, excuse me, Jesus. Well, the reality is that it's very recent that it was literally part of Russia.
Right.
Again, it's kind of like the Israel-Palestine relevance of pretty recent history.
Yeah.
Which, because news and people's understanding, news mainly, move so fast these days, it all of a sudden doesn't seem very recent. But you talk about Ukraine, Ukraine in the 90s, that's when it went independent from Soviet Russia. It became its own thing.
Yeah.
Like, the 90s is not that long ago.
Yeah.
If it was you and I again, this is not me justifying Russia. It's like just painting the context around this. You're talking about Donbass being predominantly Russian. Donbass is a massive battle area.
Yeah,
you look at that and you go, oh, we'll just let them have it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't sit well with the Ukrainians who live there. Or like the Ukrainian government, for example. But if like the 90s is literally within our memories. Never mind the generation above us. It's so recent times that it makes total sense that there are probably a lot of people in Donbass who consider themselves Russian, even though it became part of Ukraine, and totally resent the fact that it came under Ukrainian control, it became Ukrainian. What do you mean we're not Russia anymore? Can you imagine? It's like England. If it became all of a sudden not part of Britain, you go independent, and you get and like a lot of the English would be like, yeah, mega, yeah, cool, go independent. Then you get the others who go, no, but I want to be British.
Yeah.
I'm British. No, not anymore, mate. Sorry, not part of the UK.
Yeah.
So you go, hang on a minute. And then down the line, something kicks off, and all of a sudden you got like an inch of this. What the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
What is going on?
You also need to put into consideration that other people don't think about is the natural resources in those areas, with your gold deposits, with your minerals, with your oil. The Russians have more or less taken
in that part of the country.
Yeah.
In the east. Is that predominantly where the deposits are?
Yeah.
Is it? Okay.
So they have more or less taken control of. Correct. I'll stand corrected here, but I know it's in the trillions of pounds worth of natural resources that they have. So for the 18% of the population, so Russia more or less occupy 18% of Ukraine as it stands, and they have seized trillions of pounds.
Russia occupies 80%.
18.
18.
1/8.
Okay. Yeah.
So they have more or less taken control of trillions of pounds worth of natural resources in 3 years.
Okay, I just Googled a map of Ukraine's mineral resources. Let's have a look at this. Okay. All right, yeah. So in that eastern, there is a lot in that eastern region. You've got there's polymetallic, there's titanium, zirconium, what's the blue? Iron. There's manganese. Looks like some graphite.
Yeah. But there's a lot of gold and oil deposits in those areas.
Beryllium in Crimea. Yeah.
So when you actually look at and again, just an opinion, but when you look at the bigger picture, you can sort of see why did we look at what we gained out of invading Iraq? Okay. I'm just speaking on opinions.
I know. Yeah. That's why I put my hands up. It's like,
we know why.
We don't bother fighting over places that have got nothing to offer us.
Yeah.
Financially.
Yeah.
It's the harsh reality.
Yeah. Afghanistan more or less offered us nothing, apart from a strategical stronghold where it sort of sits in the world. But in regards to mineral value, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think it really offered us that much.
There's some oil fields there, to my knowledge, right? Let's have a look. Afghanistan, natural.
But there's a bit of a picture painting here, isn't there? With all these places where we invade.
Map of Afghanistan with mineralized areas. Let's have a look. I mean, it gives us a map. We won't say how much. Untapped natural resources, Afghanistan. Oh man, that's not a good map.
It's in my understanding. I don't think it's a great deal.
Copper and
But
tin, mercury. Yeah, iron. 1.7 billion tons of iron across the country. I don't know how valuable that is. There's gold, not loads of it though. Lead and zinc. None of these are crazy sought after, are they? But yeah, no, it makes sense.
just an opinion,
and looking at the Ukraine map, there is a lot of natural resources elsewhere in Ukraine.
A lot, mate. There's and it's not only it's the main pathway into Europe, but it's a very wealthy country in gold deposits, oil, and all the stuff you've just read out. So it's just an added layer of okay, well that makes a bit more sense now, because you're sending millions of soldiers over scorched earth to be sent to the death for what? Because the war hasn't really moved in 3 years, 18%, 20%. But on the grand scheme of things, they're actually boundary in the lines haven't really moved. You give and you take, but in regards to the amount of money, resources, and human life that's been thrown into that war, there's been no gain. And the Ukrainians seem to be doing more defending.
Lots of money has been made by people not in Ukraine.
A lot of money.
And people not in Russia.
Yeah. Massively.
Well, lots of people getting very rich. Yeah. Which is another aspect to our involvement, in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it's one of those. It's not even a dirty little secret anymore. It's just one of these horrible facts that you come to realize after the fact and go. You're talking about Iraq. I think a lot of people struggle with reconciling their involvement in things like Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Whether either they saw people killed or they killed people.
Yep.
Or both. And they go, and then they have an epiphany and they go, maybe we shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't have been there. Maybe.
Yeah.
And then you try and understand what your part in it was, and then maybe you get a massive guilt trip, and then people live a very long, miserable life because they feel horrendous for it.
Yeah.
I am not one of those people.
Yeah.
I've managed to weigh things up in my head and go, okay. But the reality is wars are fought for power and money reasons. That is why it's fought. But wars these days, I think, are very rarely fought to protect your homeland.
Yeah.
They're doing it to increase the power of your homeland, and arguably that's an indirect protection measure.
Yeah,
but not all the time these days. And especially with the way capitalism has advanced in the Western world. Where significant influence politically.
Yeah,
Ukraine being an example, Afghanistan being an example, Iraq being an example, Syria being an example. Take Israel being an example. Take your pick.
Yeah.
A huge factor in all of these conflicts is how much money can be made by the people who supply the things that pervade the war.
Yeah.
It's a reality. It's a horrible reality.
Yeah.
It's a horrible reality. There is a conspiracy theory of biological warfare labs in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Want to comment on that?
Don't know anything about it. I don't know anything about that.
You look genetically engineered, mate. You're like a unit. Were you born like that?
No, I don't. I don't know anything about that, or so. It's not something I've come across anyway.
Sorry, I thought I'd ask the question. Mate. Yeah. All right, you got some more questions here in the chat, which didn't get on to earlier on. Okay. Oh, there's one on you about the atrocities, and we covered that. It's like what atrocities are you certain the Russian military's done, and has the Ukraine military committed atrocities too? I think you covered that already. Yeah. Ukraine have done bad things. Russia have done bad things. The thing is on this, in times of all-out war, stuff gets real dodgy, and I think any military ends up doing things that you shouldn't have done because you get bad apples, or you have extreme circumstance, You know, all you got to do is go back and look at like things like Second World War or even more recent wars, and put yourself in the shoes of like Stalingrad.
Yeah.
Putting yourselves in the shoes when you're under the defense of Stalingrad.
Yeah.
No one's following rules. No one's following the Geneva Convention, not that it existed then. No one's following law of armed conflict because your literal existence is under threat.
Yeah.
You know, you're doing whatever you need to get by.
To survive.
You know, and you think about the consequences later on.
Yeah, yeah.
Which it has to be the situation in a lot of parts of Ukraine.
Yeah.
You know, in fact, you were saying you said on Icebreaker, not trench warfare. Where is it? The battlefield is a very lonely place in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Now, I think I understand what you mean by that. But do you want to elaborate on that? Is that
Yeah.
In fact, will you elaborate? I'm not going to suggest what you think, but
No.
elaborate on that.
Meaning, when we talk about robotic war and when we talk about drone warfare, you know, when I say drones dominate the battle space, they dominate the battle space. They're on stag. They're moving around. They're patrolling areas. So why would you put...
What the drones are?
Yeah. You know, so, you know, gone the days from what we know stag to be in, you know, you have literally got 4 soldiers pushed into, you know, onto an apex of maybe the forward line of the trench facing the Russians, wherever they may be at that time. But more or less you are on your own, you know, and, you know, sort of drones are doing everything now. They're patrolling the skies.
So you mean when you mean it's a lonely place? You mean it's like void of very many humans?
Yeah, you know, like as we, you know, look at the, you know, you watch your films of the, you know, you see soldiers in a trench and there's, you know, you're all having a laugh and you're all doing whatever you're doing. You know, even, you know, when we were training and, you know, as we see trench warfare, what we think it is, you know, where there's a platoon in, you know, a trench and you're doing this and you're doing that, you're going into your daily routine. In reality, it's not like that. You know, you've more or less got a couple of soldiers pushed out just in the event a Russian soldier pops his head up and makes an advancement towards their trench. But more or less, it's a very lonely place, mate, you know, and it's a scary place to be because there's drones just apps. There was I believe that, and the statistics might be wrong, but it is there or thereabouts, that at any one time in Ukraine, there's over 700 drones in the sky.
Really?
At any one time. This numbers might be out, but it's ridiculous. I believe, and I will do some digging on it, and I will be, and I just have a quick look, mate. At any one time in Ukraine, there's over 700 drones in the sky.
How many drones are flying in Ukraine? This may not be specific a question, but all right, okay. Let's see if the numbers in here. But all right, drone statistics, courtesy of Brave browser search. All right, Ukraine is currently producing approximately 200,000 military drones per month.
Yeah,
200,000, with a target of manufacturing 4.5 million drones in 2025 from domestic factories alone. This production includes a mix of kamikaze first-person view drones and more advanced long attack drones, with the majority being low-cost, mass-produced quadcopters used for precision strikes. That's right. So the next time you're out there flying your drone, kids, and you're getting some cool footage in the local park, think about the same drone as out there taking some poor Russian or poor Ukrainian soldier out, because the Russians are deploying them too, right?
Oh God, yeah.
Ukraine's
really good at them. You can't take that away from them.
Ukraine's drone production capacity has surged since the start of the war. Yeah. Blah, blah, blah. As of October 2025, Russian forces are launching hundreds of geranium-type drones from multiple airfields towards Ukraine, indicating an ongoing aerial offensive. It doesn't say how many are flying, though.
If you maybe type in at any one time.
Drones flying Ukraine at any one time. Russia will soon fire 2,000 drones a day. Russia launched nearly 500 drones and missiles on Ukraine overnight on Friday, the October the 10th, with 465 drones, including kamikaze, blah, blah, blah. As of October the 10th, so 465 Russia launched overnight. Not giving me a daily figure, mate.
it was something that I come across, which is obscene, isn't it? You
Okay,
know?
here we go. So we got a general figure here. All right. Uh, in previous months, Russia has launched record numbers of drones with 6,245 recorded in July 2025. Okay, 3,625 divided by 30. No, is it? 6,245. 6,245 divided by 30. 208. That's just Russia.
Okay.
208 a day, just
Yeah.
Russia in July. Yeah, and Ukraine is. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's probably from both sides.
I'll believe you. 700.
Yeah, it's something around that. I was reading something, and so when I say it's a very lonely place, and a lot of these soldiers get cut off from their fallback positions, and this is through things that I've seen with being attached to units and by, because this is stuff that happens on a day-to-day basis, and that's when I mean it's a very lonely place, because when these soldiers are ordered to go out and be on that final trench position and the Russians are 300 meters away, they never know when they're going to be able to get back, because as soon as they move, they're killed, and they could be out there for weeks, if not months. And yeah, it's a very lonely place to be, and when I say scorched earth, it's literally scorched earth. Everything's burnt. Even the trees are burnt. It's just what's left standing of this tree, and there's a trench position more or less in it, and that's where they'll be. It's absolutely brutal, mate. And that's across the whole country.
What makes me laugh is that there are, I think it's still going on, where we bring in Ukrainian soldiers over here to like upskill them, give them some additional training and stuff. And I'm thinking, our British military have done next to nothing for years now.
Yeah.
For years. Obviously there are some units that have got some significant combat experience, in inverted commas, significant relative to the rest of the British forces.
Yeah.
But nothing that Ukraine have got.
No.
Like, what experience can we offer them right now?
Nothing.
We can offer them some, very specific skills training that they won't have, from a war fighting perspective, advanced sort of fibula tactics and these other things that they could do with improving on, maybe, or SF specialist, SF and reconnaissance oriented stuff. But aside from that, the fuck can we
could teach them the basics, and I think we as British soldiers are very good at the basics. But in fact, who are we to teach? They will be teaching us the dynamics of warfare very, very soon. We were at a stage where we were the people going around training people, but things have changed. And I've spoken to the military, I've spoken to various units of the military about Ukraine, and we can offer them nothing, and in fact, I've actually had a conversation with Ukrainian soldiers who have been to the UK, and they are fully aware that our training is not up to scratch. Who are we to teach them trench warfare? Because we have no
drone
clue.
warfare.
Yeah, or drone warfare.
Yeah.
Who are we to teach them an advance to contact, which we'll do and nail several times a day in Brecon? It's nothing like the reality of what you're seeing in Ukraine, because the minute you move, you're killed. So yeah, I think we can teach the basics very well, but in fact, the dynamics of actual warfare, I think we have zero input on what we can teach. It's
there's a proper flap going on at the minute. It has been for a few years. As soon as, in the UK, as soon as it was realised the way, like how fast warfare was developing over there, the way it was going, drone orientated, and knowing how long it takes our military to pivot and like improve our training processes and stuff, there's a mad flap going on to try and upskill us. Because the reality is, if Russia decide to come knocking on our door tomorrow, or one of our European neighbours, they would have the upper hand immediately.
Oh yeah.
Specifically because of the drone capability and our inexperience with dealing with it.
Yeah.
You imagine how many people we'd lose in that first battle, regardless of how much better trained we think our soldiers are. Their technological capability would smash us.
Unbelievable.
And this is a harsh truth.
Yeah,
it's a harsh truth that people don't want to live with. I firmly believe that during our time when you and I served, we were one of the best, one of the top 2 or 3, if not the top, most capable British forces in the world in terms of individual soldiers' ability.
Yeah.
Capability, fitness, discipline, all of that, tactics, all of that. That is not the case now.
No.
It is not the case. That is not the case now, mainly because of that experience thing.
Yeah.
Because Russia, Ukraine, they have oodles more than us.
Yeah.
You know, fitness going to carry you a long way. Fitness is going to carry you a long way. Discipline is going to carry you a long way. Your general, general soldiering ability is going to carry you a long way. But it's only so far now. There's a limit to it.
Yeah.
Because as you said, it's a
Yeah.
robotic war.
Yeah.
You know, we go to war with Russia, we're gonna have a hard time.
Oh yeah.
A hard time.
Yeah.
You know, it's a worrying time. Genuinely, it is.
It is,
Well,
mate.
I mean, one of the things, right?
Yeah.
One of the things on it is that is not knowing what Putin's intentions are when it comes to Europe and the West.
Yeah.
He's really not sure. I was pretty convinced up until relatively recently that he didn't give a fuck about over here. He had no these grand plans of taking over the world or expanding beyond what he's already got. I was kind of thinking, kind of just wants to get Russia a bit stronger, take back some of the areas that were like during Soviet times, made the empire, so to speak, a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
But not mad expansionism. And now I'm not so sure. And it's also after some conversations with people who have access to intelligence that I don't have access to intelligence, that I don't have access to. And I respect their opinions greatly. And I think that, maybe, as China realize, maybe they see that the West is in a relatively weak position politically.
Yeah.
You know, the way, and the societal unrest plays a factor in it as well.
Yeah.
We're probably the weakest we've ever been, capability wise, for decades and decades and decades and decades.
Yeah.
And that presents opportunities that you think Putin would have to be considering.
Yeah.
Europe's in disarray as well politically.
Yeah.
You know, these are real situations.
Yeah.
We can barely organize and control ourselves internally, let alone fight a superpower like that.
Yeah,
And they are a superpower,
Yeah.
albeit a weakened one.
Yeah.
Not weaker than they were before. You know?
They say, don't they, that when this war started with Russia and Ukraine, that the Russians could actually sustain themselves for 10 years. So they were in a position to sustain themselves for 10 years on their own
I didn't know this.
to fight this war.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Really?
And obviously they're 3 years in, so more or less they've got another 7 years where they could sustain.
I didn't know that at all.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
surprises me.
Yeah.
You mean as in resources to keep the
So
country going? If they were sanctioned by everyone.
If they were sanctioned by everyone and they could do this for 10 years without any help off anybody, so, and again, that's an achievement within itself when you're looking at the grand schemes of war and, what they are actually capable of doing, and they are a superpower, they're very capable, which is concerning, but yeah, it's, when I thought that war couldn't get any worse, it's actually getting worse, and I am starting to be concerned in regards to what's going to happen next in Ukraine, because it doesn't seem to be ending. There's no end to that war. We are now seeing the beginnings of the end of the Gaza and Israel war. Even though it will be slow, there seems to be progression going into the right direction. I don't see that in Ukraine. I see it getting worse and worse and worse. With the drones flying over Poland, falling into Moldova and neighboring countries, that's only going to create problems. If you look at what NATO are doing now with the jets, putting them on patrol, this is the first time this has happened since the war. So it's going into the actual direction we don't want it to go into. And I've always said, it just takes one idiot to make one wrong decision, and we're going to find ourselves roped into a war somehow, and in fact, it's starting to concern me more than what it ever has done in Ukraine.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Do you want to elaborate on that?
Just how dangerous it's becoming, and with
you mean to spill over into Europe? You mean?
Yeah.
Don't let me put words in your mouth.
Yeah, no. That's exactly what I think, because, and again, this is just everything based on what I'm seeing, and on one hand, you may think, well, that'd be absolutely insane. But on the other, well, they're actually prodding because they are doing things that they've never done before.
You mean the Russians?
Yeah.
In what way?
Putting drones over into NATO.
Okay, right, yeah.
that's the stance. It's not just one or two that have accidentally gone over. You don't accidentally fly so many drones into Poland. That's done. That's done. That's done purposely. You know, it's all the digital, all programmed digitally, aren't they? They know exactly what they're doing. So it's not one or two. It's actually quite a lot. You know, and it just takes one idiot to do one stupid thing. You know, and it's going to change the whole dynamics of this war.
How many Russian incursions European?
Even missiles. There's been down missiles, hasn't there, in Poland?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not just the odd drone, is it?
So look at this. Okay. At least 15 Russian airspace violations have been recorded in the EU over recent weeks and months, involving both fighter jets and drones, with several additional incursions likely linked to Russia. Poland. Okay, let's go through these. Poland. On the 9th September, at least 19 Russian drones flew over Polish airspace, marking the first direct engagement with Russian assets since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. This prompted Poland to invoke NATO's Article 4, leading to the launch of Operation Eastern Sentry. Estonia. On the 12th of September, 3 Russian MiG-31 jets crossed into Estonian airspace for 12 minutes before being forced to withdraw, prompting Estonia to also invoke NATO's Article 4. The list goes on, mate.
They're prodding, aren't
Denmark and Norway. In late September, drones were spotted over 5 Danish airports, including Copenhagen and Aalborg, causing temporary closures. Norway's Oslo airport was also closed for 3 hours due to drone sightings. Danish and Norwegian authorities are investigating these incidents, which are suspected to be linked to Russia. Romania. On the 8th and 13th September, Russian drones I did not know about all these. Russian drones violated Romanian airspace during attacks on Ukraine, prompting the deployment of F-16 fighter jets to monitor the border. Lithuania. On the 28th of July, a drone crossing the Lithuanian airspace in Russia, later found armed with explosives in a military training area. Germany and France. Germany reported drone sightings near Schleswig-Holstein and Frankfurt Airport, while France detected unidentified drones over its Montmellon-le-Grand military base. The European Parliament, on the initiative of Renew Europe, has debated a resolution urging swift and coordinated action to counter these escalating hybrid threats. I did not know about all those.
It's a lot.
Fucking
and
hell.
that's not a mistake. They know exactly what
That's
they're
not a
doing.
mistake.
And they're letting them know that they can hit them if they want to. You know, so like I said, it's just one stupid idiot making one stupid mistake, which will trigger a response. That's my concern, you know, and I'm looking at going back into Ukraine in the next couple of weeks, which is something we can talk about. But, you know, I'm overly concerned, you know, with moving in and doing things that I would quite comfortably do previously. Yeah, due to the significant movement of drones and missiles in the West. So yeah, you know, you didn't know that, you know, and this is stuff that we're just touching on. But if you actually look into it, it's quite worrying.
Yeah,
it
is. That is very worrying indeed. God, just another concern you don't need.
I know.
You know what I mean? It's like, God almighty.
It's another headache, isn't it?
let me just worry about like the school run.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be nice, wouldn't it?
I get into the shop before it shuts at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You know, and get
walking the dog or something.
Walking the dog,
yeah.
mate. You know, the media does this thing. I despise mainstream media en masse generally. Right, I've got some good friends who are journalists, and they know I think this, but I like them.
Yeah.
But I'll say it anyway. And the media always is a good way of catastrophizing everything, and there's always a drama around the corner. And this is real.
It's real, mate.
Very real. You know, Israel and Palestine. Yeah, whatever. You know, in the terms of the threat to the UK, yeah, whatever.
Okay.
And it's real sad what's going on there. But when you think about Russia, you know, Russia threat to us, you know, China being very quiet, they will absolutely be involved in these things 100%. In different ways, you know, and Russia and China get along very, very, very well.
Yeah.
You know, and then again, you look at how disorganized and and discontent, how disorganized our country is, or the UK is, and how
Yeah.
disorganized Europe is, and how disorganized the US is and Canada is, and the Western allies, so to speak,
Yeah.
right? And then how much social unrest there is going on. And to go back to a point earlier on, we couldn't organize a piss up in a brewery
No.
right now. We couldn't. It's prime time to strike if you wanted to.
Prime time, mate.
Prime time.
Yeah.
Because we'd really struggle, especially when you think about over here in the UK, especially when you think about, we've got our own military problems, retention,
Yeah.
recruitment. It's tiny anyway.
Yeah.
It's tiny anyway. And let alone then that knowledge and experience gap we've got.
Yeah.
Even if you called up the most experienced of us from those Iraq and Afghanistan campaigns
Yeah.
and brought them back now, still massive knowledge gap.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to go stand in front of a drone. I'll go if I need to go and defend my country and defend my homeland, defend my kids. 100% put me there. I ain't gonna come off very well though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You don't want to be getting chased by a drone, mate.
No,
Because it'll catch you.
no.
I do a brief, and I've done a brief across the military called Battlefields of Ukraine, and I've been into units where I've sort of give like, what type of brief do you want me to give? Do you want me to give the honest one, or do you want me to give you the watered down one? And one particular unit said, I want you to be honest. So I briefed the battalion, and they were just in complete, when I spoke to them about Ukraine and the dynamics what they could be walking into quite easily by someone making a decision, we're now going to go to war. You could have heard a pin drop in that room, mate, by showing them videos of people that dress like them, who look like them. Well, this is the reality of it, mate. So, and I think a lot of people signed off after that brief, but fair play to them. They wanted a reality of what's actually going on, and deadly silence, because I don't think soldiers today fully understand what they're potentially looking at. It's all TikTok, it's all social media driven, it's all, they don't see what's going on in front of them.
Yeah. And because, I agree. And because, because these literally attacks and deaths are being live streamed and easily uploaded to these platforms, it also completely desensitizes people to it,
massively.
including soldiers,
soldiers.
because the significance of that, it means when you desensitize the impact of someone getting killed like that, then you tend to not be that concerned about the implications of that, and what leads to that, which means then you're not considering how to deal with that threat. You're not paying attention, and I think you kind of get this all the time when a new conflict is starting up. It's not like now. This is a major change, major technology development, literally a night and day change on how warfare has been conducted. Probably the biggest in decades. I mean, the biggest change before this must be when they moved from open like fighting to trench warfare back in the early 1900s. And then moved away from the First World War trench warfare type fighting into what we now understand as conventional, or we did understand as conventional warfare in World War II. This is bigger than that. More impactful than that, arguably. And it is going to take an actual war until people start paying attention. I mean, we had this on that, on that where you asked them, do you want the watered down version or do you want the real version? And we had a similar situation when we were getting guys ready for Afghan early on, and we just come back from that 06 tour. I said that Herrick Fall, the first, there were 3 power went out on, and we came back, and up to that point, people, almost all of the military had never experienced combat in inverted commas, or prolonged combat, repeated firefights on a daily basis for that long. And we were getting the next unit ready to go out. I won't name the unit, but they, and we went down to train these guys, and because we had the benefit of just coming off a tour like this, and they were going through their normal, beat up training program for going out to Afghan, and they were just treating it like it was some career course in Brecon, or some 3 weeks down in a live firing range. And we were looking at it thinking, if they go and behave like this out there, because they're not taking it seriously enough.
Yeah.
Because they don't understand, they've not experienced this actual kind of fighting.
Yeah.
They're gonna fucking die, lots of them are gonna die, and they come off real bad. And they asked us to not scare them. We specifically said, don't scare them with it. And this one unit, it was a battalion, and 2 weeks we were with them for, and we got a week into it, 10 days into it, and I was talking to one of the company sergeant majors, and he was pulling his hair out because he had been out, and he knew that they were going to have problems, and he trying to said, "That's it. You like don't butter it up for them anymore. Just tell them straight."
Yeah.
And I stood in there with these three other guys from three power in there, and we didn't want to scare them, but also we wanted to prepare them for going out there. We knew what was going to happen if they did it, and it was things like first aid training. They weren't first aid skills. They weren't paying attention to it. Like, you're going to need, by the way, your team medics who you just put through some random shit normally for the last 10, 15 years, you're actually going to need them.
Yeah.
You're either going to need to do stuff. And, it's not get down on one knee to look at the map. It's getting your fucking belt buckle.
Yeah.
It's no pretending anymore.
Yeah.
Going through the motions. And we stood in the room with this company, and the three of us up there, and we told them straight, like, you carry on doing what you're doing and the way you're doing it. We've been repeatedly saying to you, improve these things. A lot of you are going to not come back. Again, because you're a fucking pin drop, mate.
Yeah.
But it changed things.
Yeah.
It made them then, that the remainder of that training, they actually started paying attention, because they need to be frightened to it. You need to frighten people, give them a reality check. You can't fuck about in war, mate.
No.
You can't fuck about in war.
One chance on you.
You can't. But again, you can't really understand the implications of it until you've experienced it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to go out in Ukraine and do what you're doing, and you're not even out there as a soldier.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to do it, mate, because of this drone threat that I don't understand at all, let alone go and be a soldier there.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
No, I don't need that in my life.
Yeah.
I don't need it in my life.
It's bad. It's bad, mate.
So fair dues to you, mate. Fair dues to you, because it's an important job. Media, protecting the media. I truly believe it. As much as I fucking hate them, if they weren't there, we wouldn't get any information.
No.
Apart from first person view from drone footage.
Yeah.
But what have we not covered? Did you anything you wanted to cover that we haven't covered? I know you didn't come in with a list of things.
Yeah. No, just basically, more or less, one of your questions on the icebreaker was the stark realities of what its psychological effects it's had on children. But that was one of the questions.
Yeah.
And just want to touch on that, where in 2022, I was asked to do security for ITV, filming a documentary called Children of Ukraine. It was aired on ITV, and basically it was a documentary based on the psychological impact that the war has had on children. So from February up until August time, I've been working with journalists, some of the biggest stars in the industry, sort of getting them into places. We're going to get this story in, out, done, back home, having a brew, doing whatever we're doing until the next day. Where more or less we were doing this documentary, and it was a documentary on children. And instead of going in and out and doing what we were doing, we're going in and staying in, and we're actually embedded with these children that are in orphanages, who have lost their parents, who have been subject to some of the most horrific crimes, which were done by Russian soldiers to them, and we did this documentary, and we traveled the whole country interviewing kids. And it was really, really sad, and I always remember I got offered to come to the screening in London, actually. And I was desensitized from, I was there to do a job. We're there to work. So when I was there to work, sort of the emotional impact didn't affect me because I had some people to look after. But in fact, when I come to the documentary, the screening of the documentary in London, within the first 2 minutes of it coming on, this big security guy who's meant to be the tough one was the first one blubbering, because what I was seeing was the most horrific thing that I'd seen since I've been in Ukraine. Maybe because of my dad, I'm compassionate towards kids and all that type of stuff. So I always remember walking out, and the film director, they're all outside. I said, "Listen, I'm going to go back to Ukraine." She said, "Oh, great. You know what?" I said, "I'm going to go back to see the kids. I'm going to go."
You said that?
Yeah. I'm going to go and take them some Christmas presents. And she's like, "Well," and this was like October time. I literally had 6 weeks to prep this trip. It was planned on the back of a fag packet, mate. It was like, yeah, I'm just going to go. Don't really know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to go. And that's what I did. So in December of 2022, managed to get a truck, managed to get a van, packed them full of presents, and drove to Ukraine from the UK, and drove around the whole of Ukraine, finding these kids that we've done these documentaries with, and to give them Christmas presents. And it's the most satisfying, most rewarding thing that I've ever done, and then I've continued to do it. And it's actually turned into a project. So, I've done this about 8 times now, where I've been back into to Ukraine. And the project's
Are you going to the same kids every time?
Yeah.
Or the same places, yeah.
No, we go to different places, but more or less. So this year, what we're going to be doing this year is we're actually going to be looking for the kids that we sort of lost touch with. So after we did it the first time, the project sort of grew arms and legs, and I was doing work with other sort of external humanitarian agencies to come and assist, because I knew the country that well, and I had access into so many different areas where impactfully we could go in and help. Because what happens is a lot of people take aid to Ukraine, but in fact, they take it to the border of Ukraine. They take all the glory, saying we've been to Ukraine, where in fact, this stuff is more or less stolen, it's robbed, and it's not going to the people. And I've got a stance where no matter what we take, I will take it direct to source, to the people. So we sort of developed so many relationships with orphanages, children's hospitals. We've got children into safe spaces where we've got them from really dangerous areas and pulled them back into with the connections that we knew internally inside the country. And yeah, like I said, I've continued to do this for the past 3 years, where this year, so when I said to you, I'm going back to Ukraine in the next couple of weeks, is we're actually going to go back with a little bit of a different stance where, yes, we're going to go back to the orphanages that we always provide help for, but we're also going to go looking for the kids that we've lost touch with, in Donbass, in Kharkiv. These kids were so traumatized by what had happened to them. A lot of them lived in Mariupol. We all know what happened in Mariupol. And, that's the sole aim for the trip this year. So we're going to be leaving the UK around Christmas time, and we're going to drive into Ukraine, and we're just going to go on this mental mission, mate, to find these kids and to go and give them a present, just to say we've not forgotten about you. And when you said to me, what do you think helps children? Well, what helps them is showing up. And when you show up and you tell a child that you're going to be turning up, as long as you turn up and you're compassionate, that's all the kid wants. They just want you to turn up and keep to your word. And I've always said to these children, that I will always be there and I'll always come back and support you. And that's the sole aim of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve. So, and that's a project called Children of Ukraine. That's something that I set up.
Who's doing that with you?
Say again?
Who's doing it with you?
Me. There's going to be me, my colleague, Danny, I like called Danny Mail, who was, I met him on the circuit. And then Amanda, who's a firefighter. She has a huge passion for humanitarian work, so she's going to be joining us this year. So yeah, mate.
That is amazing, right? I think there's so many charitable organizations out there.
Yeah.
I think there are too many. I think that most of them don't do a good job of what they're doing. I think they get too big to be able to, a lot of them start off out with honest intents. A lot of them don't.
Yeah.
And they get too big. And I think that the impact of what they can do is really watered down. So when you get a group of people like yourself with that initiative to go out and do something like this, where it's small, its target is specific, and it is absolutely impactful, guaranteed, measurable. You're changing lives there.
Massive.
Especially for kids, mate.
Yeah.
Especially for kids. It's hugely important.
Yeah.
Hugely important. What happens, how Ukraine turns out, who has what areas now, it turns out I don't really care. I really don't, to be honest. I do care about the impact of little people's lives, though.
Yeah.
And anyone in their right mind does, whether they're a dad or not. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you? So commendable, mate. It's mega doing that and going out there, especially as you know how significant the threat is.
Yeah.
You know, and anything I can do with support with that, let me know.
Thanks, mate.
You know, and if is there a way that people can support what you're doing? Like, how can people help you do that?
So obviously I can give you my socials and stuff. But yeah, you know, sort of any sort of help, financial help, or you know, if people want to donate, you know, whether that's physical or financially, I'll give you my social media details and it'll be on there. You know,
Okay, I'll put, well, the social media details in the blurb of this podcast, so you'll find Steve's stuff now in there. Anything else?
I think we've covered everything, mate.
Covered a lot, mate. We covered a lot. It's mega. Listen, it's a pleasure to know you, mate. I'm really glad that we met, you know, last year doing that. I'm really glad we can make this work. Thanks for giving me your time.
Yeah.
Good luck to the team going out and stay safe, man.
Thank
Stay
you, mate.
safe. And listen, get back in your after.
Yeah.
More than be great to hear the story of how this goes and the impact you made. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you, mate.
And
Thanks for having me.
no worries, mate. Cool.
Cheers,
Well
pal.
done.